public, private, denominational, and parochial schools, it is the paramount duty of every system of education to conduct its activities, select its textbooks, and order its curriculum in such a manner that the youth are presented with the educational opportunity and means which will assist them in becoming responsible, participatory citizens. None of the propaganda. I could get an A for grammar and English on this paper. The bill doesn't come up to this standard, but you will reject this. You will stick with what you haven't even read, and that's why we have a problem as a legislature. We should take pride in what we do. If not pride, we should try to avoid embarrassment. That whole law as it exists should never have been on the books. It was put there in 1949. Some of you all may not be aware of what the attitude in this country was then, and it doesn't alter that much. Mere movement is not the same as progress. Mere change is not the same as progress. When white people write me the slurs and the racial threats, telling me all the progress that black people have made in America. Oh, we have progress, if you want to call it that, but it's against the opposition of the government, the churches, the schools. Every inch that we have moved forward has been fought tooth and nail. It wasn't where white people just suddenly came to a realization that what's in the Constitution should be seriously taken. It ought to apply to everybody, every human being, but that's not the case. Even to go to school, we had to fight. Little girls were attacked and had to be accompanied by federal marshals to go to school because grown white people were throwing tomatoes, rocks, and other missiles at a 5 to 8-year-old child. That's what they did. And I don't want to give you the details of what happened to the black children in the high schools. But some of it, white kids would come up and pour hot coffee on them. They would trip them, and then when one of the girls fell, they would try to take the clothes off. See, we know from experience what white people will do. And after 82 years of it, nobody is going to tell me that America is the land of the free and the home of the brave, that there is liberty and justice for all. I could be out in the street. I could be throwing bombs. I could be setting fires. I could encourage people to take the streets. But what is going to be left when I'm not there? What about the innocent people who would be hurt? I am trying to alter the structure of this country, the little part of it where I might have some influence, to make it be what it ought to be to everybody, for everybody. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Chambers. Senator Holleran, you're recognized. Not seeing Senator Holleran. Senator Lowe, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I don't see Senator Holleran either. The last time we talked on this, Senator Chambers asked me about our national anthem, because I had brought it up and I'd recited the national anthem. And I thought this is a very appropriate week for us doing it, because last week was National Anthem Day. Senator Chambers asked me which war was the national anthem written about. And I responded something like a Revolutionary War. That's the point of this bill, is so that our children can learn. They know the right place where things come from, what war the national anthem was written about. It was the War of 1812. Senator Chambers. I knew that day, but I wanted to make a point. I didn't mind somebody calling me out on it and everybody whispering about me. I wanted to make a point that it is important for our children to learn and to learn properly. That's why I'm in support of this bill. It's a teaching mechanism. We need to continue to teach our children our history, no matter what our history is. And I believe our history has been tainted at times because we've left part of our history out. But that doesn't mean it wasn't history. We must report all history the way it is, the way it occurred. That's important for our civics. And I appreciate those who are trying to make a point of it. I'm glad Senator Slama has brought this bill and has cleaned it up some. I'm glad she has listened to those for it and against it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Lowe. Senator Pansing Brooks, you're recognized.
I'm waving.
Senator Pansing Brooks waves. Senator Merman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm proud as a former school board member to stand in support of LB 399 and the underlying amendment. I think American civics is very important to be taught in our public schools, and not only in our public schools, but also in our private schools and even home schools. My daughter does homeschooling. She has been off the last day or two, as was mentioned earlier. I was very happy to receive a grandchild from her early this morning, so she's not teaching homeschool today. But I've been very pleasantly surprised in my experience with her and the homeschooling that they, as homeschoolers in the homeschooling program, have a very big curriculum on American civics and history. They do spend a lot of time teaching American history about our Constitution, our Declaration of Independence, not only what those documents say, but also the underlying documents that those things are based on. So a very good program, and I think that's just very important to have that in our curriculum, no matter how it is taught, which homeschool, public school, private school. So I just wanted to give my support to the bill and the underlying amendment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Merman. Senator Kavanaugh, you're recognized.
Thank you, Speaker. President, sorry. First, I'd like to, again, congratulate Senator Merman on his 5th grandchild. I hope your daughter is giving the kids spring break this week. Maybe give herself a few days off. I also wanted to acknowledge some of the things that Senator Chambers said, and just say how sorry I am that you have experienced the things in life that you have and the hatred that you have for the color of your skin. It's not something that anyone should have to endure inside this building or outside of it, and I appreciate you standing up today and giving voice to that. We were reminded how far we have not come with the latest news stories around the young man working on a campaign here in Nebraska, and it's unfortunate that he felt emboldened to say such things, and it's unfortunate that he feels those things. So I am sorry for you, Senator Chambers, and I will always stand with you in support. And with that, I would like to yield the remainder of my time to Senator Chambers.
Senator Chambers, you're yielded 3 minutes and 40 seconds.
Mr. President, thank you, Senator Kavanaugh, but nobody need feel sorry for me. The Rock of Gibraltar is like velvet compared to how hard I am. These racial slurs, these threats have as much impact on me as the sweat of a gnat would have on the Rock of Gibraltar. I don't ask anybody to protect me. I don't cut and run. I will die the way that I live. People say that, don't they? Well, actually, it doesn't mean anything. We don't know when, we don't know where, we don't know how. One thing I do know, that things are not as they ought to be in this country. People may be upset and express offense. The guy who was working for the governor. But this legislature, remember, is the one that was unwilling to acknowledge the personhood of our LGBTQ brothers and sisters. It's kind of ironic that a black man who should be able to take delight from white people putting their foot on the neck of other white people. Why shouldn't I glory in the fact that you all are telling me that some of your white brothers and sisters are so unfit to walk the earth that they should not even be protected in the workplace? But it doesn't work that way with me. I don't have to have a hammer upside my head to know that a hammer upside the head hurts. And if I saw somebody about to experience that and I could prevent it taking place, I would. I have been consistent throughout my life in trying to see that every human being is treated in a way commensurate with that something we call human dignity. I'm the one who speaks for the worst murderer, for the ones you all throw away, the ones you all say are not fit to live. And you've got Jesus, and I don't have any of that. All I have is my brain. All I have are my experiences.
1 minute.
All I have is my ability to think and understand things, and then whatever it takes to act in accord with those things. If I'm standing alone, if I'm speaking alone, it's not to get anybody's approval. It's not to be praised. There's only one person that I care about in terms of what that person thinks. And that person will never turn against me, will never betray me, will never leave me, because that person is deep down inside of me. And that person, you all might call it a conscience, is what leads me to do all of the things that I do. So I'll take time away from those very important issues to try to make a silk purse out of a sow's ear in terms of this LB 399. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Chambers. Senator Albright, you're recognized.
Thank you, Speaker Hughes. I just rise today to in support of AM 617 and LB 399. I really want to let Senator Slama know, as a brand new state senator, she's doing an exceptional job on this bill and listening to all of her colleagues and trying to make this the best bill possible for Nebraska. Because this has gone on for so long, I've had an opportunity to talk to a lot of people in my district about some of the things that they do. And not just in fourth grade do they come down to the Capitol, but but just visiting with the American Legions and how they ask us to come in and speak to their high school groups. I had the pleasure of doing that twice, and it's unique to me to know that people would actually have some questions about things that you would just take for granted that they would know. But certainly in District 17, they are going above and beyond. And I just realized that not everybody in the state does the same thing as each district. So it's going to be great to see this come into law and be able to help this, not only the schools, but some of the school boards be able to do what they need to do. But I just wanted to have a shout out to District 17 for doing such an awesome job in the schools right now with civics with the children. So I don't need to take all of my time, but if Senator Chambers would like to have the mic, I'd be happy to yield my time to him. Thank you.
Senator Chambers, you yielded 3 minutes and 10 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Albright. I had spoken with both Senator Slama and Senator Bowles on this provision that's before us. What I do is to read legislation. On the page of the amendment, which I think may be 5, that deals with what will happen to individuals who may not carry out the dictates of this bill. It goes after people who are appointed or who are employees. I don't think that should happen. The responsibility should not be bucked down to the underlings, and the underlings are the ones who would be fired. On page 6, there are duties set out for the State Board of Education and the State Education Department, but there's nothing in the way of termination if they don't do what they're supposed to do. So what I had done in addressing what is before us now is to just leave in place the duties of the school board, the superintendent, and whoever else would be mentioned, and strike all reference to the appointed or the employee who could be subject to termination if all these things were not done. I would strike all of that, but then I would list something that's a caution not only to those officials, but all officials. Compliance can be compelled by a writ of mandamus, pursuant to, and I gave the section of statute. Let these people know that when the legislature puts a mandate on them, they are to carry it out. And we don't have to wait until somebody may be fired who is an underling and is to take the fall. Somebody, and that somebody could very well be me, would seek a writ of mandamus.
1 minute.
But by putting it in the law and let it serve as a warning, these officials will do their job and it won't be necessary to carry that out. I read this stuff. This bill, the current law, reads like a propaganda document. It talks about doctrine. That's not what education should be about. This law as it stands, LB 399 as it stands, is the epitome of what LB 399 should be working against. This is not the way education is conducted. This is propaganda. I read the piece that I wrote to indicate how you can say what they claim they want to say without all of the dust raising, without all of the self-aggrandizement.
Time, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Albright and Senator Chambers. Senator Chambers, you're recognized.
Thank you. Mr. President, members of the legislature, you may find it hard to believe I care about the legislature. You know why? It's the only hope that people situated as black people are, the LGBTQ community are, women, and everybody who lacks power. Not because those in the legislature right now are doing the right thing, but the legislature is the instrumentality through which, if you get the right people here, will make things closer to what they're They ought to be based on promises contained in the Constitution, other documents, presidential proclamations, and so forth. I would not try to sink the legislature as an institution because I don't like the people who are here now. They're not going to be here forever. But what the people of Nebraska did when they put in term limits to get rid of me is to gut the only branch of government whose job and role are to represent the people. The courts don't represent the people. They interpret, construe, and apply the law. The governor does not represent the people. The governor executes the law. The ones who represent the people are the legislators, and to spite me, first of all, they enshrined me in their Constitution. Everybody will know, if they have any awareness of the history of term limits, that that was to get rid of one black man who studied the rules that the other white senators would not study. So rather than study the rules, get rid of him, then nobody's embarrassed. Nobody's feelings are hurt. But you gutted the legislature, and that damage can never be corrected. In other states, there are two houses to the legislature. If one is term limited out of the representative branch, they can move over to the senatorial branch. That memory, that institutional memory, is retained by the legislature. Here you have one house. When somebody is put out, that's it. Nobody remembers. Nobody knows. There's no way somebody could be in a legislature anywhere in this country and be deemed a veteran after being there 2 years or even 4 years. But here, after 4 years, you are a veteran. Don't know what brought the legislature to where it is. Don't know what the law is that pertains to the legislature or the constitutional provisions that relate to the legislature. So I have to try to do what I can to maintain some degree of respectability for this body. And respectability doesn't mean being polite and saying all these nice things and not ruffling feathers. When feathers need to be ruffled, ruffle them. The legislature is supposed to do that. This is not a tea party. We are the ones who are passing laws that are going to affect people generations down the line. We are dealing today with some nonsense that was put into the law in 1949. It's been there all of these years. It was trash then, it's trash now. I don't know which of my amendments Senator Slama will approve of, but that's the way it always is when you're in my position. Some white person approves. Some white person says thumbs up. Some white person says thumbs down, and that's the end of it. What people don't realize is that thumbs up did not mean that a person would survive. If you read Roman history, when the thumbs were up and outward, that meant the person on the arena floor should die. Should die. It wasn't thumbs down and that meant you died. People don't know. Knowledge is power. The book says, do all this learning, get it all, but with all of your getting, get an understanding. And that's what I'm trying to persuade you to do this morning, is put something in the law, if you intend to have it, that makes sense. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Chambers. Senator Kavanaugh, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Chambers, I did not mean to imply that you were not strong. I think everyone in this body knows that you are the rock that you say you are. I do think that it is important to rise, especially when we have young college students sitting here every day watching us, listening to the words that we say, to acknowledge that what happened in the case of this campaign was wrong, and to acknowledge that we don't think that it is acceptable to be intolerant of people just because they are different from you, and to spew hatred and division because of that. And this young man, that is what he stands for. And I just want to make it clear to the young people that watch us every day that that's not what we stand for. And to young people that are watching that maybe don't have the strength yet that you have from life, that we do not tolerate hate in this state. And I thank you for your words today and most days. And I'll yield the remainder of my time to Senator Chambers.
Senator Chambers, you yielded 3 minutes and 37 seconds.
Thank you, Senator Kavanaugh. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. President, and it's interesting how close the amount of time that I'm yielded is stacking up. This bill today presented us with a golden opportunity. We should have dismantled all that had been put in the books 49 years ago. Now what I have to do is pitch and patch. Add a little here, take a little bit there, cut along the bias. All of these things, why won't the other senators do it? Because they don't care. They still haven't read the E&R amendments, which now comprise the bill. Haven't read what they're voting on, what they're praising. This is an example of why Hitler had a person whose job it was to deal only with propaganda. He understood the power of propaganda and what it took to gain control of the minds of the masses of people. He said you have to, he didn't use these terms, but you dumb it down to the lowest common denominator of those you're trying to reach. That's what you do. And whereas people might be offended at the small lie, if you tell the big lie, that is the one that will get you across. President Trump is trying to do that, but he's not adept at it because he's not a smart man, even though he brags about it, boasts about it, and insists that he is very smart. What he should say, if he wants to indicate that he's got something going on upstairs, is that he is intelligent. There's a difference between being smart and being intelligent. But he's not smart enough to know that when he says he's smart, it doesn't reflect intelligence. But what he is showing, you don't have to be intelligent to be president of the United States. You all are talking about how great America has become and what it is. You have a man right now who's the president. He has lied. They've documented thousands of lies. He laughed and joked about grabbing women in their private areas, joked about it. He has ridiculed a guy who was what they would call deformed, mocked him, laughed at him, then denied having done it after he tried to duplicate the way the guy's limbs were frozen. Ridicules women, hates black people. He is the one who used that S-H-I-T word and put hold on it to apply to African countries and Haiti. That's not racist. And then somebody talks about how Israelis, how Jewish people have influence in politics. Well, look at that. Is it called AIPAC? They do wield a lot of power through contributions. That's in the realm of politics. Quiet as it's kept, there was a Jewish House member who said what the young Muslim lady said was not anti-Semitic. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Kavanaugh and Senator Chambers. Senator Lowe, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. And once again, I stand in support of 399. It's a good bill. I had a lot of good instructors going up through middle school. Back then we called it junior high and high school. And my civics instructors laid down the foundation of knowledge upon me of history and what had happened in our country and in the world. Some of it good, some of it not good. I remember that. I remember I had to do a study on Iwo Jima and the carrying of the flag up the hill. It was over Christmas break. And I took all of Christmas break to study that. Everybody else was outside having fun, and I read 4 books that week on Iwo Jima. It made a lasting impression on me. Civics is very important. A lot of civics is our history, and we need to continue to focus on that, and we need to teach where our country comes from, the beliefs and its foundations, and how we're changing, because we're always changing our country, and I believe it is for the better for the most part. I may not agree with some of those changes that are happening. I may not agree with some of the changes that happen here, but it is our civics that we are dealing with. It is our people, it is everything about this embodiment of this building that we are teaching. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Lowe. Senator LaGrange, you're recognized. I'm sorry, Senator LaGrone, my apologies. You weren't here.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I was a little confused there for a second. Excuse my Marco Rubio impression. So just to give everyone an update on where we're at, there is an amendment being worked on with bill drafters right now. So I'm just trying to give Senator Salama time to get that hammered out and get that done. Excuse me. Again, I support AM 617 and LB 399. I think this is how the process should work. I'm trying to take care of some antiquated language with the amendment that will be coming. As Senator Chambers just laid out, it's from the 1940s and needs to be cleaned up. So I think this is a good process in order to do that. So again, simply, I'm just trying to give some time to have that accomplished. And in doing so, hopefully we can make this an even better bill. I think this really goes to the heart of why we're here, is to try to make good legislation. And I think this is a great example of that. I think it's also a good teaching moment for a lot of us new senators to see exactly how the process is supposed to work and can work. And that's when everyone sits down, try to make a bill, a better bill, and hammer through our differences and find language that we can all agree on. And that's, again, what Senator Salama is doing right now. We're trying to get an amendment down from bill drafters, which I think will address a lot of the language that Senator Chambers was referring to. And so I look forward to having that amendment down here when we have an opportunity for that. Would Senator Gregor yield to a question?
Senator Gregor, will you yield?
Yes, I will.
Thank you, Senator Gregor. Senator Gregor, you were in the military, correct?
That's correct.
What branch?
Well, quite a few of them. The Air Force, the Army National Guard, and the Air National Guard.
Well, thank you for your service. Did you hear me earlier discussing the United States survey freeze with Senator Brewer?
No, I missed it. Sorry.
Okay, well, I was just looking around the room when we were talking about, the history of this country and teaching folks about the history of this country. I thought there was a lot of instructive imagery in this room. And one of those pieces is the freeze that you might have a hard time seeing since you're on that side of the room, up there about the United States survey and the survey of the lands. I was asked Senator Brewer a few questions on it. He indicated that he was an infantryman and not an engineer, and I didn't know if you might be able to shed more light on that process.
On the engineering process?
No, on the survey that took place of the United States of the lands that we had acquired when we acquired them? If not, that's fine. I kind of sprung this on you, and I'm just trying to.
Yeah, well, not a lot of history as far as that goes. I got, my part was aviation throughout the military.
And so can you talk a little bit about that? About your experience in aviation?
Well, my aviation career started back in the 80s.
1 minute.
What I did as far as going down to Fort Rucker, Alabama, and became a helicopter pilot, medevac helicopter pilot on the UH-1 Huey and the UH-60 Black Hawk, and then I eventually flew the King Air, the C-12. But however, I carried that on to Fort Riley, Kansas, Big Red 1 in my last deployment, where I actually was with the aviation sale of the main command post. So my aviation career took more than just flying helicopters.
Well, thank you for that service. And again, Senator, thank you. That's all I'll question you. But again, I'm just trying to make sure that we have the necessary time to get this amendment down, to take care of some of the antiquated language in here, so we can make this an even better bill. And I would ask the chair, how much time do I have left?
4 seconds.
So I don't have to take up that much more time. I'm sure I will eventually. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator LaGrone and Senator Gregor. Senator Holler, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, good morning. Well into the morning. Civics is something that I believe has been woefully neglected, not at some level in Nebraska, but throughout the country. Civic knowledge and public engagement is an all-time low. A 2016 survey by the Annenberg Public Policy Center found that only 26% of Americans can name all 3 branches of government, which was a significant decline from previous years. Not surprisingly, public trust in government is only at 18%. And voter participation has reached its lowest point since 1996. Without an understanding of the structure of government, rights and responsibilities, and methods of public engagement, civic literacy, and voter apathy will continue to plague Americans' democracy. Educators and schools have a unique opportunity and responsibility to ensure that young people become engaged and knowledgeable voters. When civics education is taught effectively, it can equip students with the knowledge, skills, and disposition necessary to become informed and engaged citizens. Educators must also remember that civics is not synonymous with history. While increasing history courses and service requirements are potential steps to augment students' background knowledge and skill sets, civics is a narrow and instrumental instruction that provides students with the agency to apply these skills. This analysis finds a wide variation in state requirements and levels of youth engagement. While this research highlights that no state currently provides sufficient and comprehensive civic education, there is no reason to be optimistic that high-quality civic education can impact civic behavior. Only 9 states in the District of Columbia require 1 year of U.S. government or civics. 31 states only require half a year of civics or U.S. government education, and 10 states have no civics requirements. While federal education policy has focused on improving academic achievement in reading and math, which they should, this has come at the expense of broader curriculum. Most states have dedicated insufficient class time to understanding the basic functions of government at the expense of other courses. Nationwide, students score very low on the AP U.S. government exam. The national average for the AP U.S. government exam score is 2.64, which is lower than the average AP score, all but 3 of the other 45 AP exams offered by schools. Most colleges require a score of 3.0 to higher, and some require a score of 4.0 or higher to qualify for college credits. Only 6 states had a mean score of 3.0 or above, and no states had a mean score of 4.0 above on an AP U.S. government exam. States with the highest rates of youth civic engagement, and I believe this is what it should be all about, trying to engage youth in civic engagement, tend to prioritize civic courses in AP U.S. government in their curricula. The 10 states with the highest youth volunteer rates have a civics course requirement for graduation and score higher than average on the AP U.S. government exam. 7 out of 10 states with the highest youth voter participation rate score higher than the average on the AP U.S. government exam.
1 minute.
There are many many policy levers for advancing civic education in schools. We're talking about this with LB 399, including civics or U.S. government courses, civics curricula closely aligned to state standards, community service requirements, instructions of AP U.S. government, and civic exams. While many states have implemented civic exams or civic courses as graduation requirements, these requirements often are not accomplished by resources to ensure that they are effectively implemented. Few states provide service learning opportunities or engage students in relevant project-based learning. In addition, few students are sufficiently prepared to pass the APSU U.S. government exam. So we want to engage our youth in civic activities.
Time, Senator.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Holleran. Senator Howard would like to welcome the following guests seated in the north balcony: 55 members of the Omaha Education Association and 15 students accompanying them. Would you please stand and be recognized by the Nebraska Legislature? Thank you for coming down. Senator Chambers, you're recognized, and this is your third time at the mic.
Thank you. Mr. President, members of the legislature, what Senator LaGrone is experiencing is something that I've done down through the years with and for various speakers. There would be a need to take some time without recessing the legislature, and I would always be the one the speaker would come to and ask, how much time could I consume? I'd ask, how much time needs to be consumed? He would tell me, and I'd say, well, the rules say that I can only speak 3 times, so you're going to have to line up people to give me time, which they did. And unlike young Senator LaGrone, I was able to take that time and use it without stumbling, without faltering, because I had a lot on my mind and in my mind. Senator Lowe correctly mentioned that the war, when that national anthem, as it's called now, but the Star-Spangled Banner, was the War of 1812, but the battle occurred in 1814. It was the Battle of New Orleans, and that's the one where the British were going to whip the United States people. Andrew Jackson promised black men in New Orleans. And at that time, when you counted the slaves and all other black men and some from Haiti, they outnumbered the white people. Andrew Jackson promised that if these men fought to help the United States win, they would be appropriately rewarded. They didn't know that the term appropriately in the mouth of Andrew Jackson meant you'd go right back to the condition you were in before you fought and helped rescue this country. Black people have fought in all these wars. I mention it because the military was touched on earlier by somebody else. Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation and was condemned for it, and he wrote a letter to a person which is included in his works. And he asked that person, was he opposed to black men being in the Union Army? Then he proceeded to mention the battles that but for black men would have been lost. He said, if we give up every bit of land that these black soldiers have won for us and now hold for us, we will lose the war in 2 weeks. Black men provided the balance of power during the Civil War, but you're not taught that, and you don't believe it because you're never told that. We've always been the ones who had a stick over us with a carrot at the end that was always just out of our reach to keep us going in the direction they wanted us to go. We knew what was happening, but we thought that maybe along the way we can make some things better for our children than they are for us. That is not the way it turned out. That's why you have term limits in Nebraska, because of a black man who could put 10 words together and make sense. I was offered by a professor at the UNL Law College a job if I would take it. I didn't want to teach. A priest at Creighton wanted me to teach a class at Creighton. I didn't want to teach at Creighton. I don't want to teach in any classroom. When I got out of school, I didn't want to go back for any reason, but I will go back occasionally to talk to students. What we ought to do in this legislature is lead by example. Otherwise, we're just what some people might call a debating society, and we don't debate very well
1 minute.
either. With all of the talk of civics, making America great, understanding the government, what did this legislature do a few days ago? Would not even let a vote be taken on a bill whose design was to make it possible for our brothers and sisters to be protected in the workplace against discrimination because of what they are or were perceived to be. And in 2019, that's what this legislature did. And you all don't talk about it. The chamber was about as empty as it is now. And yet you'll pontificate about America, democracy, and why you need LB 399. What you need is a good mirror, and clean it off and look at yourself and ask yourself, like Michael Jackson, take a look at the man in the mirror and see what you think about it when you're honest.
Time, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Chambers. Senator Lowe, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. The First Amendment. By the way, I do support LB 399, and we'll take a look at the amendment coming from Senator Slama. The First Amendment. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble, and to petition the government for redress of grievances. It is the freedom of speech which gives us the power to dissent. It also protects the minority who may hold ideas that are contrary to the majority. Let me say that one more time. The freedom of speech is what gives us the power to dissent. It also protects the minority who may hold the ideas that are contrary to the majority. That's a very powerful statement, and it has been holding true in our country for a long time. It allows the states with not much population to hold power equally to that of a state with greater population. You know, I also believe in the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment is a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That is very important to people because nations have been known to govern not properly, and the people need recourse, just as in the First Amendment, where the small and mighty may take over the great and powerful. If Senator Chambers would like the rest of my time, I'd be glad to yield the rest of my time to Senator Chambers.
Senator Chambers, 2:30.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Lowe. Members of the legislature, give me time so we can make it possible for Senator Slama to do the work that she's trying to get done. I like what Senator Lowe touched on when he mentioned the First Amendment and the right to freedom of speech. That's all I've ever exercised when I came here. They've got closed-circuit television cameras. They had holes that they drilled into that beautiful wood when I came down here so they could have some troopers in another room watch me. They had stationed troopers up there in that little box-like area to watch me. I was 1 out of 49. I didn't come down here to fist fight, although I'll defend myself. I knew what kind of body this is supposed to be. And I came down here to learn the rules, which was not difficult. This is the legislature's rule book. It was by this rule book that this legislature was gutted, because the wrong man learned the rules and played by the rules and did it better than the other 48. That's why you have term limits. Talk about freedom of speech. I spoke freely. And what did the white people in Nebraska do? They wanted to shut me down. So they got term limits to say that after I served 2 4-year terms back to back, I had to leave. Well, I was so old at that time, they were sure that I'd be dead and couldn't come back. I sat out my 4 years, and I'm back. And after next year, I'll have to sit out another 4 years. Whether I'll come back or not remains to be seen. Whether I'll even be alive or not remains to be seen. But the funny thing about life, some who are half my age may not be here because the grim reaper, whom they now call the International Harvester, will have decided to harvest them. But I will be left here to encumber the ground. As well as I can remember some things, my memory has slipped tremendously. That's why I say I've forgotten more than some people know or will ever know. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Lowe and Senator Chambers. Senator Lowe would like to welcome the Leadership Kearney Group. They are in both balconies. There are 50 of them. Would you please stand and be recognized by the Nebraska Legislature? Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, announcement, the Government Committee will have an executive session at 11:30 under the South Balcony. Government at 11:30.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Next in the queue, Senator LaGrone, and this is your third time as well.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I'm hearing that we're close on the amendment, so I want to talk generally a little bit about what it does, and then we'll move into another conversation with Senator Brewer. So really what the bill does is it goes through and takes all of the antiquated language from the 1940s statutes and reworks that to modernize it, to make it more clear, and really addresses a lot of those language concerns. Excuse me. I think this bill is important because I do think it's important to understand our history and make sure that we give our young people an opportunity to learn about that history. And so part of that history in Nebraska is obviously the contributions that Native Americans have given to our culture and our society. And so I was wondering if Senator Brewer would yield to a question.
Senator Brewer, would you please yield?
I would.
Thank you, Senator Brewer. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about Native American history in Nebraska and how much they have contributed to our state, which is a great amount.
Well, we've had the discussion on the floor with the chief standing bearer, but Nebraska has kind of a twisted history in many ways. If you look at what happened at Fort Robinson, we asked the 9th and 10th Cavalry, which happened to be black regiments, to guard the Native American prisoners that were there. So try and wrap your mind around that for a little bit. And then very soon after that, they were transitioned in the military. As a matter of fact, in World War I, we had over 10,000 Native Americans that served, yet it wasn't until 1924 that Native Americans were even made citizens of the United States. So they served in World War I without even having the title of citizen. But with that said, in Nebraska we have a number of historic figures, whether you look at Red Cloud, Standing Bear, Crazy Horse. These were all Nebraskans, technically, and they each were known for, different unique parts of history. When Red Cloud signed the Laramie Treaty, he said that he had given his word and he would not go back on it, and he was hated by many of his relatives and fellow Native Americans because as they had what was known as the Indian Wars, he refused to fight it, and because he had given his word he wouldn't go into battle again in that agreement of the Laramie Treaty in 1867. And that was just his nature. He gave his word and he stuck to his word, although it can be said that the government didn't stick to their word, so some felt that that was never a binding obligation. But the story of Standing Bear and what he did in a court, proving that he was every bit of a man, as much of a man as anyone else, and that his blood was red just like everyone else's, I think was a way to tell the story of why there shouldn't be that act of discrimination that they were dealing with at that time and being moved to places they didn't want to be. The history is both good and bad, but it's a history people need to know.
And thank you, Senator Brewer, and I completely agree. I think it's so important that we recognize there's good and bad in many histories, and I think it's important that we learn about both the good and the bad so that we can understand what we have done well and what we have not done well, and we need to change in the future. And I agree with Senator Brewer that I think one of the best moments of this legislature is when Senator Harr's bill, I believe last year, that changed the statute in Statuary Hall in Washington, D.C. To Standing Bear representing the state of Nebraska was a huge moment. And if you don't know that story, I'd strongly encourage you to go read about it. I think it's, speaks ill of us that lawsuit was required, but I think we should be very proud that Standing Bear was Nebraskan and what he fought for and all he went through, and that he won that case. So I think that was a great moment in our history, and I hope that it is something that is, I know it's taught in our schools now, but I think it's something that should get more attention, hopefully through this bill. How much time do I have left, Mr. President?
8 seconds.
Well, perfect. I will take all of that 8 seconds. I definitely appreciate the opportunity to speak. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator LaGrone and Brewer. Senator Albright, you're recognized.
Thank you, Speaker Scheer, and I'm listening, so I'm going to ask Senator Chambers if he'd like to have my time. Speaker Scheer. Senator Chambers.
Senator Chambers, 445.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Albright. Members of the legislature, I often use metaphors, analogies, parables. Sometimes when you tell a story, you can make people understand a profound truth which all the explaining would never be able to achieve. There is something metaphorical going on here this morning. Two people who probably are as far apart politically as you might find in the legislature. One is a female, one is a male. The female is white, the male is black. The female is the youngest person in the legislature. The black man is the oldest man in the legislature. Together, they are trying, I'm going to use an expression I did earlier, to make a silk purse out of a sow's ear. I had said last week that I would spend that time combing through this bill, LB 399, and rewrite it, offer amendments, but if there was not a person who was receptive, it would have all been in vain in one sense, because it was for naught. Nothing was done with it that was designed to make the bill better. But it would not have been for naught based on the way I judge what I do. I'm always outnumbered, always outgunned. Doesn't make any difference. I cannot take solace in or find an excuse just because I'm outnumbered. That does not in and of itself prevent me from saying what I ought to say, from doing what I ought to do, from lacerating and lashing my hard-hearted colleagues. You all will sit around here. You will make appeals to religion. You will distort and twist provisions of the Constitution to justify discriminating against members of the LGBTQ community. I don't understand that. These are your people. There was a woman who made a statement recorded in the Bible, and people who first heard it and were not knowledgeable thought it was between a man and a woman. Whither thou goest, I will go. Whither thou lodgest, I will lodge. Thy people shall be my people, thy God, my God. That was a woman speaking to her mother-in-law. I'm not going to tell you her name, but you can find it. There are things in that Bible which, as Gershwin said, ain't necessarily so. Like they tell all you children the devil's a villain.
1 minute.
That ain't necessarily so. What did Billy Joel say? He'd rather laugh with the sinners and cry with the saints. Sinners, they have more fun, and only the good die young. Some people turn it around to say that, I won't tell you what they say. Leave some things for you to speculate about and come to understand. But if we would let this bill that we're working on be viewed as an analogy or metaphor for where we are as a legislature, and the way we're trying to improve this bill, why don't we try to improve our knowledge of our processes, develop a respect for the institution of the legislature, and truly be the representative of the people that this body is supposed to be. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Chambers and Senator Albright. Colleagues, I'd like to introduce some guests of mine this morning. Seated under the south balcony, Holly Clark and Avery Clark from Blaine, Minnesota, Lee Beitlick from Lincoln, Nebraska, Julianne Hoffman from Sulphur, Oklahoma, and Allery Grace Arnold from here in Lincoln. Would you please stand and be recognized by the Nebraska Legislature? Returning to floor discussion, Senator Hansen. Senator Bruce Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to stand in support of LB 399 that Senator Salama is working diligently with Senator Chambers and others to amend and to make a good bill better. So I do appreciate the time and the effort that she's putting into it, and Senator Chambers and others. And so I kind of also want to play a little bit off of what Senator Arch talked about earlier, and I appreciate a lot of his comments about the importance of civil discussion, about how we can talk about things that we disagree on in a civil manner, and that's one of the great things about our state legislature. And one of the things that he was appreciative, and one of the things that he learned by being a freshman senator, and that is a common question that a lot of us do get asked, is, you know, what do what's one of the things that you've learned or you're surprised by when you get to the state legislature? And mine, along with what Senator Arch said, mine also is donuts. There's a lot of donuts that get served in the state legislature, and I've learned a lot about donuts, and so I'm not a donut connoisseur. I like to feel like we have probably one of the best bakeries in the state of Nebraska in Blair, Jim and Connie's Bakery. Just want to give them a shout out because they have probably the best donuts in the state of Nebraska. And so I always liked the twist donuts. Those are one of my favorite ones. But I don't eat donuts a whole lot, and I've learned a lot about being in the state legislature about donuts. There's filled ones, and they make ones with candy on them now, and I think that's just amazing to me. I think I ate one, and I think if I eat too much chocolate, I start to sweat, and I ate one of those one time, and I think I about passed out from too much sugar. And so I want to advise a lot of the state senators to be careful about the donuts that they do serve here, because there are some people who are glucose intolerant. So I just want to, as a healthcare professional, I do want to put that caveat out there. And so with that, if he is willing, I will yield the rest of my time to Senator Chambers, if he so wishes.
Senator Chambers, 235.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Hansen. And your dissertation on donuts will go down in the history of the legislature. Now, you say you may not eat donuts. You know what? One time I walked down the street eating a donut, and I was arrested. Not for being black for once, but for imitating an officer. Now, they get the biggest kick out of that. I've known police officers, and there are some who would give me information about what was going on in the police station, and the chief, the safety director, the mayor, they knew somebody was talking to me. They had suspicions, but we were cagey and they could never pinpoint anybody and do anything. But there have been officers that I have known and worked with who were trying to do with the police department what I try to do in this legislature. They did not cover up for the wrongdoers. They did not deny the wrong that police officers do. And they cannot, on the one hand, say we're just like anybody else, give us that slack, and then want to be treated differently from anybody else and everybody else when they do something wrong. When a police officer observes another officer misbehaving, that officer doing the observing is the one who ought to be the first one to try to do something about it. Now, if you all weren't in the infantry, you don't know about mass punishment. But if you had a mess up, then everybody was punished. If when they came to inspect the barracks, somebody didn't have his bed made up right, then everybody would have all of the bedclothes taken off and thrown on the floor, and everybody had to do it again. That was their way of policing the mess ups, because all the others did not want to be punished for the one who didn't know how or was unwilling to do the right thing. The police are the ones who ought to police the police. Legislators are the ones who ought to police the legislators. But that's not going to happen in either case. So it's for an outsider such as myself. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Ben Hansen and Senator Chambers. Senator Hunt, Walls, and Howard would like to welcome the Girl Scout Spirit of Nebraska, representing Omaha, Fremont, and Lincoln. There are 28 young women and adults seated in the north balcony. Would you please stand and be recognized by the Nebraska Legislature? Thanks for coming and visiting. Returning back to the queue, Senator Klosky, you're recognized. Senator Klosky, are you wanting to waive? Senator Klosky waves. Senator Bosman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As we continue to discuss and have an opportunity to talk about different things. I thought, and as we're waiting for the amendment to come out, I thought it's another opportunity to talk to little Dr. Seuss. And with that, I want to go back into Wahoo Public Schools again a little bit about what they do with their green eggs and ham birthday celebration. Again, it's the 115th birthday of Dr. Seuss. I will read something from their 2008 comment from their breakfast they had that day. It says, "I do not like them, Sam I am. I do not like green eggs and ham. The people in Wahoo seem to have a different opinion about green eggs and ham than Sam I am, because many attended the Wahoo Elementary Schools at that time 11th annual, and now it's their 22nd annual green eggs and ham breakfast. Theirs was this morning that I attended. I will say I have not found that green chicken yet that lays the green eggs, but the green eggs were very good that they had. Adults and children of all ages enjoyed a delicious breakfast from 7:30 to 8:30, and along with the students and many people from the local area. The Cat in the Hat, played by freshman Lindsay, Thing 1 and Thing 2, played by seniors Kelsey and Laura, made a special appearance during the breakfast. And again, this was in 2008. With the help of fifth grader Gabby, the elementary school hosted very special guests. The time was Governor Heineman. Shannon wrote Governor Heineman a letter asking him to join her and a fellow classmates at the green eggs and ham breakfast. About 2 weeks after sending the letter, Gabby got a phone call from the governor's secretary confirming that he would be at the breakfast. When he arrived at the school, Gabby and her father, much like Harrison this morning, met me at the door and escorted me, and we had a good visit about fifth grade, about what they're learning. His favorite subject is social studies, and it was a great opportunity to meet his mom and dad as well that was there, and his brothers. So we had the opportunity to go through the school and sit down and have breakfast together, and then after that I came straight to the Capitol and got here about 9 o'clock. There was, I'm sure there's over 800, there's no place to park, there are so many people there. But again, if you have the opportunity to attend a green eggs and ham breakfast at one of your local schools, I urge you all to do that. It's a very good opportunity to go meet the students and talk to them a little bit about reading and what they're doing in the school. Another thing I want to talk about, Dr. Seuss's Green Eggs and Ham becoming animated series this fall. There's an article that I'm reading that says, "Growing up as kids, I love Dr. Seuss books. My favorite, Green Eggs and Ham," with lines like, "I do not like them in a house. I do not like them with a mouse. I do not like them here or there. I do not like them anywhere." How can you not fall in love with this book? They were fun to read and always had a lesson to teach. The wonderful moral of Green Eggs and Hams was, don't make up your mind about something until you try it. My mom used to use this book with me when I wouldn't try a new meal. It worked every time. Now a certain company is going to be bringing the book, a seller of over 800 million copies worldwide since 1960, to its network. The Ellen DeGeneres produced animated series will feature an all-star cast, including Michael Douglas, Diane Keaton, Adam Devine, Tracy Moran, and others. Devine will play the reluctant Sam I Am, who won't try the delicious meal. Douglas is Guy, am I, who just wants to say, I am to try. Green Eggs and Ham, the animated series, will debut this fall. I wonder if Senator Chambers would yield to a question.
Senator Chambers, would you yield?
Yes, I will.
Since reading is such important at all ages in life, you read a lot, I take it.
Yes.
Do you have a favorite Dr. Seuss book?
I did a parody on Dr. Seuss, and I never read one of those books before.
Thank you. Mine is, I think, Green Eggs and Ham. But I do want to stress the importance of reading from adolescence. Parents read to your children into the infants, all the way through high school and even beyond. Picking up a book and reading it is very important for what we do, to teach our young people to learn, to expand your knowledge of a subject matter, whatever it might be, and in some cases travel around the world through a book. It's a great opportunity for you to learn and expand your knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Bostoman and Senator Chambers. Senator Walls, you're recognized.
Okay, now I'm in a dilemma here. Senator Chambers, I promise to yield you some time, but is it okay if I yield it to Senator Slama? I yield my time to Senator Slama if she would like it.
Senator Walls, I appreciate
Senator
it.
Slama, you're recognized and yielded 4 minutes, 45 seconds.
Thank you, Senator Walls and Senator Chambers, for being gracious about this. I just wanted to give everyone an update, and since we're running short on time here, just kind of go through. Senator Chambers has been referencing some amendments that he's given me, and I do think many of them improve the wording of the bill. I've been working with bill drafters. If any of you have noticed my absence from the floor in the last hour, I'd just like to thank bill drafters, especially Micah, for helping me out on this. We'll see if we can get an amendment that has some of his changes down to the floor on time before we cut things off here in about 10 minutes. But I'd just like to go very quickly through some of the changes this amendment, which may or may not make it in time, will have. They're mainly just grammatical cleanups to make it a little bit less clunky. Even if we don't get this amendment to the floor, I still have confidence that this bill is ready to go. The first change we'll make in this amendment is on line 8 of page 2. Strike the line starting with Americanism until the word shall, and add the word which. So line 8 would just read which shall. Change the where on line 10 to when. Change carefully examine, as Senator Chambers has discussed with me on the mic, on line 14 to examine. Change to on line 15 to with. Change change line 22 to men and women who played a crucial role in the achievement of our national independence. That's from a slightly different wording. And then on line 23, change preserved our union to preservation of the union. On line 24, change written to include to includes. On line 25, insert in order, change the wording on line 25 and 26, multicultural education as set forth in sections 79.719 and 79.723 in order to instill, and then on line 26, again, read and not be merely a recital of events. That's a change from and not be a mere. Again, I don't have enough time to run through each of the changes coming down, and I don't know for sure if we'll make it in time, but I do think these amendments improve upon some of the clunkier wording of the bill. But even if we don't get this amendment done in time, I'm confident that the bill is ready to go, and I'd just like to take a moment to thank everybody who has played a role in getting this bill to where we've needed it to be. That extends to the Education Committee, the bill drafters, my LA, who right now is updating my computer to see if we can get this amendment in time. Senator Chambers for working with me and clarifying some points on the mic as well. This bill was a team effort, and we may or may not get this last amendment in on time.
1 minute.
But even so, I feel confident that this bill is ready to go, and I'd just like to thank everybody who helped in helping it get there. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Walls and Senator Slama. Senator Kavanaugh, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today to show my continued support for my colleagues working on this bill and these amendments, and I'd like to yield the remainder of my time to Senator Chambers if he would like it.
Senator Chambers, you're yielded 4 minutes, 35 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Kavanaugh. And I'm pleased that Senator Slama accepted some of the suggestions. However, what I would like to see is this whole thing go away. This remains a propaganda piece. It came from a period in this state's history which ought to cause shame to the people in this state, except they're spared from that because they don't know the history of this state. Some things you put in museums to remind people of how horribly people on one hand are treated by people on another hand, because the ones mistreated were weak, the ones who did the mistreating were strong, but you don't advance the cause of human development by hiding those things. They have to be acknowledged. The bad has to be rooted out. But when the society cannot even face its history, then those who are the victims of it, those who suffer from it, will never develop the same attitude toward the flag, toward the so-called traditions of this country, because although I am on the plantation with the white man, he's there as the owner, I'm there as the property. So the mere fact that two individuals are in the same location doesn't mean they are enjoying the same privileges, the same consideration. Black people have been in this country as a race longer than most white people and their families. They were with Columbus from the very beginning. And we have been misused, mistreated, abused. Never led a revolution against this country. Never bombed a church. Never went to a school and harassed little white girls trying to go to school. Never tried to stop anybody from voting. Never got into a mob to throw somebody off a bus because of his or her color. Never wrote on a menu, we reserve the right to deny service to whom we please, and the ones they were pleased to deny service to are always people of my complexion. The bill, speaking of it as a metaphor, does, as Senator LaGrone pointed out, show how people who ordinarily might be at odds in terms of ideology can cooperate to achieve a common purpose. The common purpose that Senator Slama and I had was to make a bad thing better. She won't think it's bad. She'll think it makes a good thing better. I still think the best thing would be to do away with all of this. Excise pages from one of the old statute books which contains the language of this law to show how backward Americans were, how self-righteous, self-centered, how deceptive they were. They condemned communism. Do you know that communism came into flower during the early days of the Christian church, where everybody had all things in common? That's all communism is. And communism started with Christianity. The man who wrote the flag salute was a socialist. And yet you all hate socialism because you don't know anything. And that's what I have to contend with. I read your books. I study your history. And then I watch what you do. And there's the dichotomy. I don't know how it is that I maintained my sanity all these years here, but I don't think I did. I think I'm crazy. But a crazy black man is still leaps and bounds ahead of sane white people. Imagine what I would be if I were not insane, if I were not mentally challenged. What would you have to deal with? You couldn't deal with me. But nature believes in the survival of the species.
Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Chambers. Senator Breezy would like to announce 18 12th graders and one teacher from Central Valley High School in Greeley, Nebraska. They are seated in the north balcony. Would you please stand and be recognized by your Nebraska legislature? Mr. Clerk, you have a motion on the desk.
I do, Mr. President. Senator Salama would move to invoke cloture pursuant to Rule 7, Section 10.
It is a ruling of the chair that there has been fair and full debate on LB 399. Senator Slama, for what purpose do you rise?
Call of the House, please.
There has been a request to place the House under call. The question is, shall the House go under call? All those in favor, vote aye. Those opposed, vote nay. Record, Mr. Clerk.
26 ayes, 2 nays to place the House under call.
The House is under call. Senators, please record your presence. Those unexcused senators outside the chamber, please return to the chamber and record your presence. Any unauthorized personnel, please leave the floor. The House is under call. Senator Kolowski, please check in. Senator Crawford, please check in. Senator Groney, would you please return to the chamber? The House is under call. There's been a request to move forward with a roll call vote in regular order. Members, the first vote is the motion to invoke cloture. All those in favor, vote aye. Those opposed, vote nay. Excuse me, we'll do a roll call vote.
Senator Albright, voting yes. Sir Arch, voting yes. Senator Blood, voting yes. Senator Bowles, voting yes. Senator Bostelman, voting yes. Senator Brandt, voting yes. Senator Brewer, voting yes. Senator Breezy, voting yes. Senator Kavanaugh, not voting. Senator Chambers, Voting no, Sir Clements. Voting yes, Sir Crawford. Voting yes, Sir DeBoer. Voting yes, Sir Dorn. Voting yes, Sir Erdman. Voting yes, Sir Friesen. Voting yes, Sir Geist. Voting yes, Sir Gregert. Voting yes, Sir Groney. Voting yes, Sir Holleran. Voting yes, Sir Ben Hansen. Voting yes, Sir Matt Hansen. Voting no, Sir Hilgers. Voting yes, Sir Hickelman. Voting yes, Sir Howard. Not voting, Sir Hughes. Voting yes, Sir Hunt. Voting no, Sir Kalowski. Not voting, Sir Coulterman. Voting yes, Sir Legrone. Voting yes, Sir Lathrop. Voting yes, Sir Lindstrom. Voting yes, Sir Linehan. Voting yes, Sir Lowe. Voting yes, Sir McAllister. Voting yes, Sir McDonald. Voting yes, Sir Moorfeld. Sir Moser. Voting yes, Sir Merman. Voting yes, Sir Pansing Brooks. Voting yes, Sir Quick. Voting yes, Sir Shear. Voting yes, Sir Slama. Voting yes, Sir Stinner. Sir Vargas. Voting yes, Sir Walls. Voting yes, Sir Wayne. Not voting, Sir Williams. Voting yes, Sir Wishart. Voting yes. 40 yeas, 3 nays to invoke cloture.
The motion to invoke cloture is adopted. Members, the next vote is on the adoption of Amendment 617 to LB 399. All those in favor, vote aye. Those opposed, vote nay. Have all voted? Been a request for a record vote? Mr. Clerk?
Voting aye. Senators Albright, Arch, Blood, Bowles, Bostman, Brandt, Brewer, Breesy, Kavanaugh, Clements, Crawford, DeBoer, Dorn, Erdman, Friesen, Geist, Gregert, Groney, Holleran, Hansen, Hilgers, Hickelman, Hughes, Coulterman, Legrone, Lathrop, Lindstrom, Linehan, Lowe, McAllister, McDonald, Moser, Merman, Pansing Brooks, Quick, Shear, Slama, Vargas, Walls, Williams, and Wishart. Voting nay, none. Not voting, Sirs Chambers, Howard, Hunt, Kalowski, Wayne, Moorfeld, and Stinner. 42 ayes, no nays on the adoption of AM 399.
The amendment is adopted. Members, we will now vote on advancement of LB 399 to ENR for engrossing. All those in favor, vote aye. All those opposed, vote nay. Been a request for a roll call vote. Mr. Clerk?
Senator Albright. Voting yes, Sir Arch. Voting yes, Sir Blood. Voting yes, Sir Bowles. Voting yes, Sir Bostman. Voting yes, Sir Brandt. Voting yes, Sir Brewer. Voting yes, Sir Breesy. Voting yes, Sir Kavanaugh. Not voting, Sir Chambers. Voting no, Sir Clements. Voting yes, Sir Crawford. Voting yes, Sir DeBoer. Voting yes, Sir Dorn. Voting yes, Sir Erdman. Voting yes, Sir Friesen. Voting yes, Sir Geist. Voting yes, Sir Gregert. Voting yes, Sir Groney. Voting yes, Sir Holleran. Voting yes, Sir Ben Hansen. Voting yes, Sir Matt Hansen. Voting yes, Sir Hilgers. Voting yes, Sir Hickelman. Voting yes, Sir Howard. Not voting, Sir Hughes. Voting yes, Sir Hunt. Voting no, Sir Kalowski. Not voting, Sir Coulterman. Voting yes, Sir Legrone. Voting yes, Sir Lathrop. Voting yes, Sir Lindstrom. Voting yes, Sir Linehan. Voting yes, Sir Lowe. Voting yes, Sir McAllister. Voting yes, Sir McDonald. Voting yes, Sir Moorfeld. Sir Moser. Voting yes, Sir Merman. Voting yes, Sir Pansy Brooks. Voting yes, Sir Quick. Voting yes, Sir Shear. Voting yes, Sir Slama. Voting yes, Sir Stinner. Sir Vargas. Not voting, Sir Walls. Voting yes, Sir Wayne. Not voting, Sir Williams. Voting yes, Senator Wishart. Voting yes. 40 yeas, 2 nays, Mr. President, on the advancement of the bill.
The motion is adopted. LB 399 is advanced. Raise a call. Clerk for items.
Mr. President, your Committee on Enrollment and Review reports LB 284 is correctly engrossed. Health reports LB 248, 556, and 570 to general file with amendments, 571 to general file with amendments. Priority bill designation, Senator Kavanaugh adopts LB 311 as our priority bill for the session. The Executive Board reports LB 561 to general file. An amendment to be printed to LB 399 by Senator Chambers. Series of name adds. Senator Wayne to 15, Albright 15, Lathrop 15, DeBoer 15, Wishart 605, Slama 640. Mr. President, Senator Greger will move to adjourn the body until Wednesday morning, March 13 at 9 o'clock a.m.
Members, you've heard the motion to adjourn. All those in favor, say aye. Opposed, say nay. We are adjourned.